Hi, I'll be doing a series of interviews with luminary CROs and executives to talk more about the Chief Revenue Officer experience on the pathway to becoming a Chief Revenue Officer. And in today's interview, I'll be talking with Lupe Feld, who's the CRO of S&P Data. She is one of the 11% of women CROs. And she has a great story to tell and some really great insights about being a CRO. And I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in. So Lupe, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. Thank you for being here. And please let everyone know kind of where you're working and a little bit about yourself. And thanks again for being here.
Sure. Thanks, Warren, so much. And yes, it's great to be here, and I appreciate the focus on just the topic. My name is Lupe Feld, as you mentioned. I am Chief Revenue Officer for S&P Data Digital, and we are a company that focuses on bringing revenue to other companies. And so that's kind of the exciting part, is as a Chief Revenue Officer of a revenue driving business, the focus is really on revenue and how we help our customers build and drive their business forward.
Yeah, but I'm curious to understand maybe a little about your current situation. So as a Chief Revenue Officer, describe for us, if you will, just the nature and the complexity of the role that you have right now, the size of the company and the types of departments you oversee, and maybe a description of the way your organization looks at a Chief Revenue Officer. Like, that would be interesting to understand too, like how your company currently approaches the role and how you're approaching it as well.
For me specifically, I deal with the sales team. I have a sales organization under me. I also have a customer experience team, a customer success team that deals with our existing clients. In addition to that, I manage, one aspect of marketing, which includes social media, and that's a really critical component for our business. We feel like everybody has a social media presence, and your social media should be a mirror of what your company does and what you're trying to project to the business, and that entitles also the website, etc. So it's a big job. It never has a slow moment, but I enjoy it, and I've always enjoyed being busy throughout my career.
How many people in the company? How big is it?
We have over 2,000 people in the company, and that includes some operations people, etc.
So I'm curious. There's a couple things you said there I'd like to dig into a little bit, and I'll ask you a couple of questions. You can answer them in any order you want. So the first one is, the way you described the Chief Revenue Officer role at your company is very much in line with the vision for the CRO collective vision for the CRO. And it's refreshing. I don't hear it a lot. Most of the time when I speak to CROs, they pretty much oversee sales almost exclusively. They dip into marketing a little bit, and in many cases don't even touch customer success. So you sound like your organization recognizes what a Chief Revenue Officer does and has appointed you in a way that is in line with, I believe, like you said, a revenue and customer focused strategy. I'm curious to know, why is that? Like, was that the case when you got there? Did you influence that? Or is that the way the founder thinks? Like, what do you think is the sort of origin of the reason why your organization, and I would say, kind of got it right? And what was your role in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's just, the nature of our business, as I mentioned, is driving revenue for other businesses. As a result of that, we really have to have our finger on the pulse of what drives revenue. And so when you still start to peel back some of the layers of what is a revenue driver for a business, it is the entire customer journey. It is the acquisition process, the onboarding process, and all of the components of what touches a customer, even your social media, even your outbound email campaigns as you're going through the acquisition process, whatever that case is. It's whether, a customer fills in some kind of a contact form, whether or not you respond in a timely basis can really drive the outcome of whether that prospect becomes your customer. And so the founders of the business really have been, kind of revenue building machines over decades. But they have maintained the agility to flex with the times and adapt to different things. And so as I took this position, we kind of looked at the different components that drive revenue, and it made sense for me to have that responsibility and that purview into those areas.
Okay, so it sounds then what you're saying is the founders of the company possess this sort of perspective already.
That's partially it. I think they did. And I think also what's important is I had the experience and the knowledge in my background. Now, the reality is it's a big job, so I have an amazing team under me. And, every day, kind of they do their area and I oversee kind of the overall strategy and lean into the areas that need to be worked.
Yeah, I get it. Interesting. I just saw the context of why I'm asking these questions, because a lot of the focus that we're doing here at the CRO Collective is that foundational problem that occurs when a company needs a CRO, and that match, right, between the way the company perceives the role and the way the person's qualified for the role. It so much drives the outcome of where the role is being appointed, right? So the problem is you've got many CEOs that don't have the sort of context that your leaders do. So they're sort of already looking for somebody just to come in and run sales. And you've got someone who's a CRO that runs sales. And so that's a match made in hell, that those two people are going to find each other, but they're not going to do the job that's necessary. If one of those two consciousnesses have a different perspective, there's a greater outcome for it to be better, right? So if the person that's being hired can bring a different perspective to that conversation, they might influence the CEO to hire it differently and vice versa. It looks like in your case, you came to the job clearly well equipped to do the job in the manner that we're speaking, and your bosses were ready to have you be on that. That's sort of it seems like very fortuitous, if I would say, and it's great, right? At what stage in a company should they hire a CRO? Like how much complexity or how much money should they be making in year-to-year revenue? Like what's the right sort of profile or time that the CRO position would make sense for a company to explore?
I think I don't know that it has so much to do with revenue as much as it has to do with the maturity of the business. You could be, a mid-sized revenue company that has matured, meaning you have an established acquisition base, you have an established customer base, and things are growing at a pretty aggressive stage. And then you are going to need that CRO person to make sure that everything is running smoothly. A lot of times, companies that are successful have great leaders that stick to their silo, and it's almost like they have blinders on and don't look at anything else. I'm all about acquisition. Don't talk to me on customer retention. I'm all about retention. Don't talk to me about marketing. And the CRO allows a company to remove the blinders and partner together towards a common goal. And so when you feel like your internal business is so siloed that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing, that's probably a good time to think about a CRO.
That's great. So in other words, you're saying, and I love it, what I say, which is there should be a sufficient level of complexity where you start to see silos forming. That's the point where a conductor needs to be brought in, so to speak, that can help kind of bring about more cohesiveness and cooperation around what you just talked before, which is that sort of that revenue journey. What would you say to someone that was in your position in the scenario where they had the experience that you did, and they were being brought into a company, and it was clear to this person that the boss really wanted this person to really focus pretty much just on sales, and they were going to hire you as a chief revenue officer? How would you address that problem? How would you advise somebody how to address that scenario?
Well, I think it's asking the right questions during the interview process. I think we're always so eager to get hired when you're interviewing for a job. And as a company, you're so interested in understanding the background, but you've already got your mindset as a hiring leader as to what you want. And the candidate is really trying to please you. And so really force yourself to have the discipline to ask questions. Why are you looking for a chief revenue officer? What are the reasons that are driving this decision? What are the areas that you think the chief revenue officer should focus on? And rather than assuming that your vision is their vision and then, getting into the position and having the ultimate collision, really ask the questions. And then even if they haven't explored it or they don't see it the same way, really begin to kind of build that position and have, those compelling reasons why things should fall under that umbrella. And, again, you're not going to convince somebody who's got their mind made up, but at least you can go, into it with open eyes and understand, to what limitation you'll have. One example that I will give you is, typically, in the past, you would see really successful salespeople that are moved into leadership because they were so awesome, and they fail miserably as a sales leader because
Right.
they never had the ability or the training or the background to lead. And so you have to find the people that are good in sales that are also kind of leaning into those leadership capabilities, that are interested in moving in that direction. And maybe it's not the top salesperson that should be the leader. Maybe it's kind of the
Yeah.
middle of the road salesperson. Same thing for a CRO. Just because you're an amazing VP of sales doesn't mean that you'll be the right chief revenue officer. And it's a matter of understanding the job, understanding the expectations of the company, and quite frankly, don't be afraid to say, you know what, this is not for me. As much as you want that job, because careful what you wish for, you might just get it. And then
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So what I'd ask you then is this, right? So we've kind of walked through the scenario from the perspective of the candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with you that the candidate may have some, but likely little influence over the way that their boss is going to proceed where they want the role, right? So I guess there's kind of two questions. One would be, if this candidate that we're talking about, this fictional candidate we're referring to, were to decide to sort of take this job and they see enough flexibility in there, or they go on their gut and they say, you know what, I'm going to do this. What do you think would be the best ways for that person to start to plant the seeds to change the nature of the role so that it can actually evolve into the role that they understand would work better? How would you advise somebody to influence their day-to-day such that they don't get stuck in that rut and they can work themselves out of it?
I think it's important to all roads lead to revenue. And as long as you can tie it to revenue, then you can make the compelling argument. And again, it's not about having the entire responsibility, but making sure you have the skill. And if you don't have the skill, hiring the right person that you can guide to make sure that they have that. So it's having those conversations on a regular basis, having the compelling arguments, and having really the data to support what you're saying. As you look at companies like yourself, there's compelling reasons why the CRO job should be structured, in a certain way, and should have the responsibility overarching beyond sales. You can't touch every CEO, but you could, as a candidate that just took this job, maybe share some of the insights from your website, from your practice with the CEO as facts, as compelling reasons to do that. And again, it's really to kind of take small steps towards kind of your final destination. And sometimes you come in the area that might be in deep trouble might be sales. So that might take, 80% of your time until you build the other areas.
Right. Like you and I said before, it becomes the curse, right? You're really good at driving sales. They never want you to leave because you're making them money. Sales is the worst job in the respect that if you're good at it, they never want you to do anything else. So it's really kind of hard to get yourself out of that. I get that. If you were speaking to a CEO, okay, so you got let's say a founder-led CEO who's looking for a chief revenue officer. In your view, what is the right time to look for a CRO, and what should a CEO be thinking about when they explore filling that position for their company?
You think about a CEO's position, really, they're kind of the overarching strategy for the business. And so they have to have like-minded people working for them. And sometimes people who are like-minded, but also can kind of push the edge a little bit. And so as you're looking at a business that has matured and has enough components of a sales team, enough components of a customer success function, marketing, et cetera, it gets to a point where all of those different silos, if you will, need to be aligned. And that's when a company needs a CRO. And so I think it's important for a CEO to focus on the state of their organization and how aligned their organization is and how well each division of the organization understands the other. And so if acquisition doesn't care about customer success, then what's going to happen is we're going to acquire customers, but they're going to churn and they're going to leave in a trite. And so it's going to be a never-ending focus for sales to fill the funnel and bring new customers in, when it's much easier. I think it's 5 to 8 times,
Easily. It's like
easier.
65% of your business comes from existing customers on average, from what I'm hearing.
Exactly.
It's really great. It's great. So I think, like, it sounds to me, and this is obviously we're trying to do here, is try and change the mindset of a CEO to think less about a CRO being like sort of like a sharpshooter and really more of like a strategic leader. And I think that's the big shift I hear. So thanks for that. So let's switch gears for a second here. So as you and I discussed, we first spoke, right? I don't know if this is correct, but let's just say for the sake of this conversation that maybe 10% of CROs are women. I'd love to get your perspective on a couple of things. One is, why do you think that is? A, and B, what could be done about it? Like, and as a successful CRO executive, what did you do that you saw would be unique under your circumstances that maybe other women who are watching this podcast may be able to get some help from or get some insight from that can help them as they're thinking about becoming a chief revenue officer?
Sure. I wish I could tell you that, when I started my career, I wanted to be a chief revenue officer, but I might be dating myself here. That position didn't exist.
You didn't. It's probably 10 years old at the most, probably. Yeah.
Exactly. And, in hindsight, I can see that every step that I took in my career guided me towards the job that I'm in now. And I think that's true with anything. Any decision, good or bad, in your career will help you to move to the next level. As I think about what are the things that helped me get to where I am, I was very fortunate. Early on in my career, I had some amazing mentors, and who later became really strong sponsors. And over that time, they really forced me to think 1 or 2 levels ahead of where I was at the time. And it gave me the discipline to understand at an organizational level how decisions were made. They were not just made because you were passionate about wanting to grow the business and you needed to hire salespeople. You needed to understand the cost that it occurred in the business, the return on the investment, and all the different components. And so the mentorship really helped me. The discipline of understanding finance. And, my mentor was incredible. He would hold me very accountable to every conversation that we had. We would always pivot back to the financial component of that. And so knowing that I was going to be meeting with him forced me to look at any situation and really dig deep as to, is this going to be good for the company overall, or is this just going to fulfill a need for me? And so that was that discipline. I think, as I think about women as CROs, I think there's this feeling, or maybe understanding that women kind of agree upon, not willingly, but that you can't have a family and achieve a high level job. Not a lot of people talk about it, but I'll be bold and I'll talk about it.
Sure, it's an important topic, and I hear it a lot from my clients. So it's definitely something people are saying. Sure.
I'm proud to say I've done a lot of great work over my career, but the one area of my life that I'm most proud of is the work that I did as a mom and as a parent. And so raising our son Jonathan was probably some of the best work I'll ever do. It can't be beat. Raising a human being is important, and I don't think you need to sacrifice your career goals because you want to be a parent. I'll tell you a story. Years ago, I worked for American Express at the time, and we had a very senior leader join the company from the outside. And I think it was within 30 days of joining, she went out on maternity leave. Now the company was shocked. Most of the leaders were saying, "I can't believe she's gone. She just literally got here." I was hugely inspired. And I thought to myself, wow, that is, not only did she achieve what she wanted to, but she was able to take the time and walk away and do something that was important to her. Over the years, I've actually followed this leader to three different jobs. No one's going to give you the job because you're a woman. They're going to give you the job because you're the best candidate. And sometimes, you forget that being a woman comes with somewhat of a perception, and we need to kind of break through that perception. Be prepared, be smart, get the experience that you need, build your business acumen, build your financial knowledge, understand what the job entitles, learn the different aspects of the business, whether it's marketing, social media, account management, customer success, acquisition. You have to know how everything kind of works together. And more importantly, how all of those things are intertwined to drive revenue.
It's great. It's really great. So I would ask this one last question. I guess it's really, really great answers. So, I have the sense, because I do have some clients that are women, and there is this sort of perception that because the CRO role is, you and I discussed this, we agree, it's largely perceived as a sales role. There is sort of this sort of old boys network, where sales leaders tend to be men. And so they become the ones who sort of are aggressive enough to kind of go for the role. And there is this sort of almost a profile of a chief revenue officer. I'm wondering if you feel that there is some sort of ingrained perception about the path to a chief revenue officer that maybe needs to be changed, or the perception, because clearly it's a much more well-defined and more complex role than just someone who's a sales leader. But is there any merit to that perception, or is it just like an idea?
I would say over my career, I've experienced, a little bit of the good old boys network. Some companies that I worked for really were excited about having women as leaders. Some organizations really weren't interested. And, that was my cue to leave, because I can't really change who I am. As a result of that, I need to find a company
Find a place that's more amenable to that sort of thing. I see. So it's less about then you adapting. It's really about finding the place that works for you. Is that what you're saying, right?
Correct. But I also see, and I've seen over the years, a lot of my colleagues, apologize for having to take maternity leave, apologize for asking for something that is due. And what I always say is, I am, as you could probably tell, I am Hispanic. So I've kind of broken the mold of, your typical Latin female. I'm very assertive. I'm very outspoken, and I don't apologize, but I'm very polite. And in my directness, I never aim to offend or try to offend anybody. But I also don't ever start a sentence with, "I'm sorry," or "forgive me," or, "I don't mean to bother you." And I think if you tend to apologize and ask for permission as you speak, you kind of become viewed as a somewhat less of type of an individual. And as a woman, I think if you're qualified, you have the experience, and you have the knowledge, I think you have to be recognized and noticed for that. And that requires, baby steps. I didn't wake up one morning and become assertive. It took a long time for me to realize that I knew what I was talking about, and I needed to just speak up because things were not being done the way they needed to be done. And I knew I had the answer. But don't be afraid to make a move. If a company's not willing to see you in that leadership role that's going to get you to that next leadership role, then maybe sometimes you have to make that move, or make that compelling argument that, hey, listen, I'm qualified for this job, and I think I should be considered for this job. Have you thought about that? And and just then stop talking and see what they say, and listen to the answers, and based on their answers, make the assessment of whether this is the right company or not.
That's great. Well, look, I'm going to end there because that's a great closing to this conversation. I could talk to you another hour. I got a lot more questions, but I want to be respectful of your time. So I want to thank you again for being here. This is really wonderful. And as I said, this conversation will be posted live. You'll be able to see it on the CRO Collective website as well. I'll post on LinkedIn. And Lupe, I just really want to thank you again. Just, it was a really great conversation. There's a lot of gems here, which I'm looking forward to sharing with the audience. So thank you so much. And it's nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you as well, Warren. Thank you so much for the time, and I wish you luck on your mission because it's a worthy one.
Well, thank you very much. I agree. Thank you.